Hi guys, so the other day I put up a video about how to do an automatic solar panel system and I said I'd do a tutorial on it, so here is said tutorial. Now unfortunately I did actually originally start recording this and I built all of this from scratch while I was recording it. Unfortunately I looked at the footage from that and it was glitchy as hell and it annoyed the crap out of me. So here we are doing the tutorial again, but I am going to take you through how all of this is done. So what you can see to start off with here is I have got this sort of base that I've built here, this sort of circular-ish sort of structure here. Now that's basically the size of my base that I'm going to have. It's going to sort of extend out this way, and this is going to be a sort of refueling station. The first part of this tutorial is going to be how to actually get the solar panels automated, and the second part of the tutorial, which will be coming up as soon as possible after this, is going to be how to have sets of batteries that will automatically flip between each other as they're sort of used. And that would just mean that as you, if you wanted someone, for example, if you wanted to make it a refueling station, you could have all these batteries that are automatically flipping between recharge and output. So when someone docks to the station, it sort of empties the batteries. Now, because it is going to be running off an automatic solar panel system, there would always be enough power to run everything on the station. But that will mean that, you know, you're not going to have someone sitting there waiting for the solar panel to go through it. It's just going to expend the battery power. Okay, right, so let me take you through what's on here. So you've got this base here, and as you can see, I have got a conveyor in the middle. Now that is where the rotor is on the other side, and that's where all the oxygen would come through if you had an oxygen system on here. Now the other things I've got is what you need to have is you obviously need to have a control station. And I've got a computer here and 2 timer blocks in a lovely British racing green sort of colour. Now I've also got a screen here which says stuff and things. Yeah, it's being daft, I know. So those are going to be what control everything that goes on here. Now if we go over to the back here we go. Try not to kill myself. On the back of that conveyor, as you can see, I've got a rotor block. Now, when you're building these rotors, it's really important here. We go into the screen here. Is when you're selecting them in the assembler, you have to make sure that you also build a rotor part as well as the advanced rotor. Just because otherwise you'll be going, well, why haven't I got those resources? It's because it only actually gives you the rotor part. Okay, so in front of that, I've got another conveyor. And I've got this sort of, I just think that looks cool like that. And I've got the 2 arms going along. Now the way I build mine is I have the conveyor at the end and then I run conveyor tubes along the arms just because I think that gives it a little bit more structural stability. So at the end of here is, if you were just doing purely solar panels, you wouldn't need this bit here. This is where I'm going to put the oxygen generators. So obviously they will pass oxygen through the conveyors, past the rotor to this conveyor, along the conveyor tubes and back along. If you're not doing any sort of oxygen system, you don't need that. And when it comes to the oxygen, because we're running it off the solar panels, they're going to be positioned the same place. You don't have to worry about actually checking what they're doing or anything like that. You can just literally say, oh, okay, well, if they're facing the same way as the solar panels, not an issue. At the end here, as you can see, I've got the solar panels just on a couple of light armor blocks. You don't need them on anything that conveys any sort of... It's not connected to the conveyor system in any way. Now, for the purposes of this tutorial, I have also put a couple of solar panels on each end, which are perpendicular to those. And that just means that while we're not turning the solar panels, whatever direction the sun is at, we are going to be getting some power on here, which means that we're not going to lose power to the blocks. And the other thing is, we can sit in here and keep ourselves safe. Now, I do have a load of oxygen bottles there, as you can see. Okay, so I'm going to take you through the setup of this. So the first thing we're going to need to do is rename some stuff. So let's just sit in this seat. There we go. Right, press K. So we can first we're going to have to rename our rotors. So I'm going to call this one rotor base. Now that is obviously that's the center thing. Now if you're ever looking at these things that are connected to your station, you'll notice that they have sort of different coloured names, and that is a good way so you can tell which rotor is the main one and the base one. So here, as you can see, these are different colour to that because they are connected via the arms to the original rotor. So we're just going to call this arm 1, and we're going to call this arm 2. Right, now these solar panels, we're just going to use one of these to decide which is the output that we want. Now the way this is going to work is with the coding on this is you don't actually get out information, you don't have like an easy way to just go, oh yeah, this solar panel's putting out this. What we're going to use is this thing here, this is called the detailed info. So when you define a solar panel or any block, you can pull out the information that's in this detailed info. So what we're going to do is we're going to put out this information here. We're going to find this here, and that will be in a text format. Then we're going to convert that to a number, and we're going to use that to find out if we are at an angle that's good. Now, we don't actually need to worry about the angles on any of this because we're doing it purely by logic. We're just basically going to say, turn the main arm until it's getting better. When it's not getting better anymore, stop the main arm. Then start turning the ends of the arms, and when they stop getting better, stop turning them. Okay, so we've got a couple of timers here. So I am going to change this to check timer. And I'm going to change that to 30 seconds. There we go. And I'm just going to set up the actions. Now you'll see that obviously where I was doing the original tutorial, so I'm just going to remove that. So what we want to do now is grab our programmable block and we want to do run. And what we want to pass through there is check. So this timer every 30 seconds is going to tell the programmable block, check how much our output is, do we need to change anything. If we do need to change something, we're going to use this one. So we're going to set the delay on this to 2 seconds. There we go. Right, now let's set up the actions for that. We'll move that again. Do that. Run, and we're going to pass angle. There we go. So we've got rotor, base, arm 1, arm 2, programmable block, check timers, and our text panel. Let's just double check what our text panel is called. Okay, lowercase p. Right, at that point, we just need to change what's going on with the rotors. So the first thing to do when you actually set this up is turn the block off, because otherwise they're going to start turning, and yeah, it'll be annoying to set it all back. So make sure you turn every block off when you're doing it. Now, the first thing you want to do is set the braking torque, or torque, as that is, to 33.6. Now, what that will mean is that that's not 33.6. Thank you. What that will mean is that when that's the amount of torque that it applies when you turn it off or you stop moving it. We want this to not drift. So basically, you want that torque to be applied as quickly as possible and stop it. Next thing you want to do is set the velocity really low. So I'm just going to set the velocity here to that. There we go. And that is that one set up. Right, now, arm 1, same thing, toggle the block off. As you can see, I had to reset them after the last tutorial. So toggle the block off, set the braking torque to that. Now we're going to set the turn speed to 0.28, and then we're going to set reverse. Because the arms are set in a 180 degree orientation from each other, clockwise for one is anti-clockwise for the other. So we always want them inverted. So when one's going positive in the angles, we want the other one going negative in the angles. So then arm 2, turn the block off, set the braking torque, we'll take it up to 0.28. There we go, and we just leave that on 0.28. This one is on minus 0.28. So off, there we go. That was a fun little glitch there, wasn't it? Okay, last thing. I'm just going to grab one of these solar panels and we will set this to, I'll just call it solar 1. That's how, and the reason we're renaming this stuff is just so it's easy for us to pull out the blocks later on. But at that point, it's time to start coding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a programmable block and do edit. Now at any point when you're doing this is you can check your code, press that button, it will tell you if there's any errors, and always remember to remember your code. That's a weird thing to say. And if you want to save your code at any point, you can do browse workshop, and you do create from editor, and that will create a new script. Now, you'll notice here that I've already done this once. So what I'm going to do is just going to bring up the tutorial script real quick. So you can... That's not tutorial script. That's not the one I want. That's not the one I want. I'll tell you what. You know what? The ironic thing is, I don't think I renamed it tutorial. There we go. So this is what we're going to be building today. Now, just to take you through this real quick. Essentially, what we have, if we have some variables here, this one here just holds information on the output of the solar arms. These are all true or false. And then after that, in every time we sort of run it, we just double check, we just sort of define all the things we need. We get that information out of the solar panel. And that's that there. Now when we get the check timer go through, we check that. Is it at a certain thing? Set some things off, start the rotation, start the angle timer. If not, we start the check timer again. And then we go through an if-then statement. Right, let's get going with this. So let me delete all of this. Let's just exit that. No. Edit. Okay, so what you start off with when you see, when you go into a programmable block, is you'll see this void main string argument. Now this argument is what we passed in with the timers. When it said sort of, what's the argument you want to send in, check or angle, that's what you sent in. You don't have to send something in, but it's a good way for you to see what's been set off. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up a variable, which is going to be decimal. We'll call that best output, and we're not going to define that as anything. And the next thing we need to do is we need to define what we're going to do here. Now, I've chosen a decimal just because that's what I like using. And yeah, originally, I can't remember the reason why I started doing it, but it really doesn't matter. As long as you use a variable in which you can have decimal places, you're perfectly fine. Or potentially what you can do is you can actually convert the output from kilowatts to watts. But then if you actually were doing that, you might find a situation where you're converting watts to more watts than there are, etc, etc. So yeah, okay, so the way you define something on this is you have to define the block type and tell it what is that name that you're defining, and it is this block type. So for example, we go my solar panel solar underscore 1 is equal to, now this is the command that you use to find a block with a specific name. Grid terminal system, notice the capitalization there, dot get block with name. Then you do some regular brackets there, and you 2 quotation marks, and we type in the name of what we want, and then we go as my solar panel. So that is a way you can find a block very easily with a specific name. When I do the batteries, what I'm going to do is I'll show you a way you can iterate through the blocks. So we can basically get a list of all the blocks and then pull out every block of a certain, of a certain type. That's going to be really useful because in this situation here, this tutorial is designed to just sort of take someone through who maybe has no coding experience or very little coding experience, and take you through getting not only an introduction to how to do the solar panels, but an introduction to the C#. That one is going to be a little bit more advanced because what it's going to do is it's going to basically find all the batteries. It's going to find how many batteries there are that you can have in pairs, and then it's just going to go through the list and say, this is battery 1, this is battery 2, battery 3, battery 4, etc. and flip them through depending on whether or not one has more charge in there or doesn't. Anyway, I'm waffling. Right, now we need to define our rotors. So my motor stator. That's how you define a rotor. We'll call it rotor base. Grid terminal system dot get block with name. Rotor base. As my motor stator. So if we check the code here, Okay. Now I was going to remember an exit and just double check. Yeah, that is what we called it there. Okay. Okay, so now we need to do this for the arms. Now, you can just copy paste this if you wanted to. So what I'm going to do is copy that. Paste all those, and we're going to give these different names. So, arm underscore 1 and arm underscore 2, and obviously we need to change what we're looking for here. Arm 1 and arm 2. Okay, sorry about that, guys. I had a sneezing fit there. Okay, so we also need to define our timer block. So my timer block, fairly simple there, and we're going to call it check timer is equal to, same thing, grid terminal system dot get block with name check timer as my timer block, and we'll just check code. Yep, it's fine, got the names right there, and we'll do the same there because we're going to find angle timer as well. Helps if I could actually copy paste properly. Can code C#, can't copy paste, seems legit. Okay, so here we go. Angle timer. Okay, so there we go. Now, there is one final thing that we need to do, and that is we need to pass all of the information. So that's not PASS, that's PARSE. I know my accent sucks for that, so that's pass. We need to pass the information that we're going to get out of the detailed info for Solar 1 to find the sort of maximum output that we're going to get. Oh my god, guys, I'm sorry, I had another sneezing fit there. I'm sure the music sort of going around in the background is probably annoying at this point. Okay, right, so let's do this without any more sneezing fits. Okay, so, right, to define this, to pass this information, we need a list. Now, we can do this in one big string or one big sentence. What I'm going to do is I'm going to split it out because you can actually, unfortunately, type off of the end there, as you can see, and it doesn't wrap the text. So this would be one long thing normally, but I'm going to split it up into two things. So the first thing is we need to define a list. So what we're going to say is list. And you see, you've got the greater than, less than signs there, the brackets, the triangular brackets. Say new list of type string. We'll call it solar info. Now what we'd normally do is then after this go equals etc. what we're going to do on the next line, but I'm splitting this out so we can see what we're doing. Okay, so we're going to say solar info is equal to a new list of type string. Now we open and close some brackets there. It's better to open and close it here because otherwise it becomes a bit confusing figuring out what brackets we need to close later on. So once we've done that, so it's a new string and these brackets are how we're going to define this. So we say solar. So we say solar underscore 1, which is what we defined up here, dot detailed info dot split. I'm not sure if that's a capitalization or a split. We'll check that in a second. We open and close some more brackets. So how are we going to split this? Okay, so we say it's a new string with those square brackets there. So I'll split that out so you can see. Square brackets. Alright, so let's close with that. New string. And then we put in these curly brackets. Now in these curly brackets we define what is the things that we're going to take out of a string. So let me just explain this here. So say for example we have a string is of a sentence. This is a string. Now if we passed that into a list and we said, okay, take out that, take out the space, what we would get is a list with 4 items of this is a string, like so. Now if we wanted to create a string that said, for example, that this is a string, and we wanted that as one string, what we could do is something like this is \n a string. I'll split those out so you can see. Now this is a formatting thing here, so you can have \n and \r. Now there are those within the information we get out of the detailed info, I think. I'm not particularly sure, but to be honest I've had no problems taking them out. I saw this on a Reddit thread, so to be honest, and it served me well, so that's what I've been doing. There's no point me really, sort of trying to rock the boat on that one. So what we're going to do is, first of all, we need to take out the spaces. So we're going to say, okay, take out spaces. Helps if I get my cursor out of the way there. Comma. We also want to take out \n, comma. We also want to take out \r. There we go. Right, and now we do a comma after the curly brackets before the end of the normal brackets. Say string split options dot none. Right, let's check the code. See if I did that split. Yeah, okay. Split is capitalized. Generally things are capitalized in C#, so yeah, it's a good idea to always default to that. Right, so now we have a list that has got all of that detailed info in there. How do we find out what that info is? Now, if you are... Let me just remember and exit this. If you are familiar with using lists, you'll understand that it will start from 0 and it will count upwards. So this will be entry 0, entry 1, entry 2, entry 3, entry 4, entry 5. Well, that'd be index of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, entry 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it'll be number 6 on the list, but it'll be indexed as number 0. I've covered this in some of the stuff that I've done on the computer graph programming. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take you through here to understand exactly what goes on. So let me just edit that. So I'm going to actually use that panel there to show you how you can understand how a list works. So just to start off here is, say you've got a list that has, for example, that list is a string. Well, that list number 0, so index 0 would be equal to this, but that would be, that list size would be 1. And we say list 1, so index 1, which is the second item, is equal to is, and that would be number 2 in the count of it. So that is how you can sort of iterate through something and figure out how to use an item from the string. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to, first of all, we're going to define the text panel. So my text panel is equal to, wow, I'm being tarded here, underscore text is equal to good terminal system dot get block with name pin. Wow. Right, so now we defined an IMI text panel. Another thing you need to understand about text panels is how you put the information in. So what I'm going to do is go underscore text, write public text. Now when you do write public text, what you'll do is you'll put in a load of stuff, and then you'll do comma, and you'll say true or false. So if you do true, this is the append value. So when you append text, what that means is whatever's on the screen, you just add this to the end of it. If you say false, it clears the screen and does it again for you. So what we're going to do here is we're going to clear that text panel. So we'll just do a blank string there, and we'll say false. Okay, so we just cleared that string. Oh, cleared all the information off of the panel there. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to iterate, which iterate is, if you're not familiar with that term, is to sort of go through things number by number, or to go through things one at a time. So we're going to iterate through the information we got from Soda Info so you can understand what's going on here. So first of all, we're going to make a new integer called I. Now we're going to do a for loop. So we do for, open and close brackets, I is equal to 0, semicolon. So I'm sure you notice here's a semicolon at the end of everything here. That is obviously the end of a command, basically. So what you have in a for loop is you have the first thing is what's the setup parameters. The second thing is what do I check every time I go through a loop to do the loop. The third thing is what do you do after the loop. So here we say I is equal to 0. If I is less than solar info, if no. Wow. By the way, I'd like to point out I'm actually typing around my microphone here, so I do apologise. Dot count. Count just tells you how many things there are in a list. And this is where hopefully it's becoming obvious here, is that if you've got the index of 0 would be a count of 1. So what we can say here is, okay, so if we start off at 0, say we had a list of only one item, start off at 0, well, on our first run through the loop, we would get, okay, well, 0 is less than 1, which is the amount of things that are in that list. Okay, we can do something. But when we get to I is equal to 1, well, 1 is not less than the amount of things that are in that list. So we don't run through the loop. It just means that when you do something like this with for loops and lists, you will never actually, as long as you do something like this where you say, okay, create a variable, go through the variable, make sure you only use that variable if it's less than the list count, then the last variable will be the last item on the list, even though they will have different numbers for the index and the actual size of the list. I know it could be confusing. Okay, and we do I++. Now I++ is the equivalent of saying I is equal to I plus 1. And as you see, everything here is split out with a semicolon. Right, open curly bracket, close curly bracket. What we're now going to do is we're going to write out the information that's we've got in this list in a way we can figure out what we want. So, underscore text dot write public text, open and close brackets. Now we're going to play around with strings a bit. So the first thing we're going to do is have in quotations a square bracket, plus, convert dot toString, open and close brackets, I. So what we're going to end up with is, so this will say, okay, every point in the for loop we're going to have open square brackets. What is I? When we want to close those brackets, just because it's going to look cool. Close square brackets, and we're going to have a normal colon there. So anything within the quotations is what is actually going to be written on the screen. And the quotations obviously define a string variable. Plus, obviously you can, I'm sure you can notice here is you can add things together. Soda info, open and close square brackets, I. And the final thing we want to do is we want to make sure that this knows to make that a new line every time. Right, and then we'll do comma, false, true. Okay, so what we've done now essentially here is we've defined our text panel. We've cleared it with the false thing. We're not appending it. We've created a new integer. We said, okay, for create this integer at I, while I is less than the actual size of the list, add 1 to I at the end of the loop. So while it's less than that list, do this. And what we write is, so this bit here basically just is going to display what current number of I we're at, and then write out the information there, what's in that value of I within solar info, create a new line. So let's just check the code. Can't spell convert apparently. It's so smooth. Okay, so remember an exit. Now what we're going to do is just going to run this. Jump out of here. And there we go. We can see everything that's in that list. So what we can see is 0 type, 1 solar panel, 2 solar, 2 panel, 3 max, 4 output, 5 is 111.56. Now if you wanted to be really detailed on this, is what you could then also do is put out this number 6 of kilowatts, which will say, okay, are we doing watts or kilowatts here? The thing is the reason I'm not doing on this is that that's only ever going to be viable for one turn of the check counter. So say for example, potentially you pulled out the information and it was like 150 watts were being displayed or something like that. Well, you sort of start turning the solar panels, etc, and then it stopped. It's only ever like for a very small amount of time do you only have watts that are being displayed. So eventually that check would go through and you'd end up at 0 watts. And at that point it would find the amount of kilowatts that should be output. So I mean a maximum maybe 1-2 turns of this would actually make this watt, converting it from kilowatts to watts, converting to that would actually make it viable. And to me it's not worth doing that, because eventually at the point of when you eventually it gets into the system of, okay, I'm doing kilowatts here, you don't actually need to check for watts at that point, because it's always going to be turning within a variable of 5 kilowatts. It's never going to be allowed to go below 5 kilowatts because you're always going to be checking. That's why I personally don't actually check for the kilowatts. When it comes to the batteries, we do need to do that. Okay, so as you can see, the information that we want is solar info number 5, max output. That is the current max output we can get. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and delete that from the coding that we're doing, and we shall continue.